building great teams has been absolutely critical in my success. 4 years later, when I got another tap on the shoulder and said, "Hey, can you go lead the adult flagship hospital?" And I said, "I'm a mom baby nurse. I've never led an adult hospital. In fact, the only thing you don't do at that trauma center is the one thing I'm good at, which is peds and women's. No, you're the right person." So I walked in that first day and just said, "Oh my." But because I didn't know, I was a sponge. I took it all in, I learned, and I allowed those people who were experts to do the work and be the experts.
This is Inspiring Women. I'm Laurie McGraw, and today I'm speaking with Kelly Nierstedt. She is a nurse. She is the president, chief executive here at Orlando Health, Orlando Regional Medical Center, one of the largest, most complex systems in Florida. She, as a leader, is dealing with a lot of different things at the organization. Kelly, you and I met at the Women Business Leaders Conference where you were one of the main speakers talking about complexity in healthcare today. Thank you so much for being on Inspiring Women.
Thank you, Lori. Greatly appreciate your opportunity to be here today. Looking forward to the conversation.
All right, well, let's dive in. So, Kelly, you've had a long executive career leading many complex organizations. You started though as a nurse. So, can you just give us a little bit of that trajectory? I find that when people start as caregivers, as clinical people, and then move into leadership, they're always grounded from that early experience. Can you just talk a little bit about your trajectory?
Or it would be a pleasure. So, as you said, I'm a nurse by background. I'm actually a first generation college graduate, and nursing was a second career for me. Not having gone to college, I lived in the New York area, had to find a job. And for me, it was just where could I get off the train and find something where I'd be employable. So, out of high school, oddly enough, I worked on Wall Street in the late 80s. But I always knew I wanted to be a nurse. I just really didn't know how to get there. So, out in the working world, I figured out that I could take out loans, I could find a way to get back to nursing school, and that's what I did. So for me, maybe because I was a little bit older and nursing was a second career, I just wanted to be the best nurse I could be. I felt like I had made it. I was going to do great at the bedside, and I absolutely loved it. So I had no ambition to go into leadership, certainly not executive leadership. And I found that I just kept getting tapped on the shoulder, right? Can you do a little bit more? Can you take on this project? Can you take on this unit? Can you take on another? So, really, the foundation of my career was just built upon doing good work in the healthcare and caregiver space and finding opportunities from there. So, one day I woke up and I was a VP of a service line building women's health programs. And the next thing you know, I was really leading a hospital. So, I never really lost the core of who I was. And today, I don't really feel very different than the nurse that I was back then, because healthcare is about the best care for the patient. So, while I certainly have a much broader business acumen and the work that I do is much more strategic and business oriented, um, my goal and my compass for the work that I do is always centered on the patient. And I've never shied away from that. I always feel it is what allows me to make the best decisions. So, while I may be away from the bedside, my heart is always there, and that is what grounds me.
Can you just talk about that being tapped on the shoulder? Because it's one thing to work hard and do good work, which so many people do. But what does being tapped on the shoulder look like? Where were the moments that you said yes that led to that next stage for you?
Well, I would always say I always said yes. I have a little bit of a fearless spirit to me, because I do believe, and I think it's certainly as women, we were in this mindset that you had to check all the boxes before you could say yes. That was the case. I would never have been in any of those roles I was tapped for. I just felt like if somebody believed in me, they saw something in me, and I should give it a shot. And I always said, well, what's the worst that could happen? I always felt like if it doesn't work out, I go back to doing what I loved, which was being a nurse. So those moments were when my work became valued enough that somebody said, "Hey, Kel, can you do this?" And I would just say, "Yeah, I could try it." And somehow I understood that I needed to surround myself with people who could teach me and I could learn. And once I did that, but I never did it as a stepping stone to something else. And I always felt this incredible amount of freedom, because if it didn't work out, I had a plan B. So I wasn't caught in the hamster wheel of I've got to perform, I've got to perform. I just felt like I'm going to do a good job. I'm going to learn a lot and I'm going to be my best self. And that has just proved to be the secret of my success. If somebody asked me today, if somebody had asked me even 10 or 15 years ago, would you ever think you'd be a hospital president? It, Absolutely not. I don't have a pedigree, college education, first generation college grad, nursing second career. I don't have an MBA. My background isn't finance. And to be at one of the largest healthcare organizations in the United States, I'm an unlikely candidate for the role. But I had great mentors and I had a spirit of say yes and you'll figure it out. Unfortunately, a lot of women don't do that.
That's right. They wait for all of the things to be true before it's like, "Oh, what? I'm ready." Yes, but you've said yes a number of times. So at Virtua Health, you created Virtua for Women at OSF Healthcare. You led a significant expansion. So maybe it seems like you're more of a leap before you look kind of executive in terms of. So can you just talk about one of those transitions and like why you said yes before perhaps you had all of the boxes checked that you knew that you were ready, but you were ready.
Well, I think oftentimes women, and a lot of people, they really don't believe that they have the skill set necessary. And they always think they're always looking to the person ahead of them to say, wow, they've really got it all together. And I would challenge that that's probably not the case. I think that people are more vulnerable than they let on to. I've always found that I'm pretty open and honest and transparent and I'm vulnerable. So I have no problem saying, hey, I really don't know. I'm going to have to figure that out. Or better, I have to build a team around me of people who know. So I always felt a good deal of transparency that allowed me to take those positions and not feel like every day I had to be on my game. Um, so again, I think in a lot of ways, I have a lot of grit. I'm adaptable and I'm not afraid to fail because I think there's always a plan B. You may not see it, and it might not be the optimal plan that you thought of, but sometimes plan B just works out just fine.
Well, having that confidence in a plan B is awesome, but we're well beyond plan B at this point. Maybe, maybe Kelly, you can speak. Maybe like when you moved to OSF Healthcare, that was a very big expansion that you led. That doesn't happen as a single person. A lot of times, when women and any leader moves to a next level of leadership, they're really forging into unknowns. Maybe talk about that specific experience at OSF and what did you go into it not knowing surprised you, but you really did a huge turnaround and expansion when you led there.
Yeah, so probably the biggest change was I was a Jersey girl, New York, New Jersey, my whole life, and I moved to Peoria, Illinois, um, smack in the middle of the state of Illinois. I think there was an Olive Garden and a Great Cuts in the whole town. So I come from this cultural epicenter to Peoria, Illinois. But what I found was a great group of people wanting to do the right thing in middle America. And I learned that so many of these kids, this was a children's hospital I was leading, were having to go multiple hours. Most of the time it was into Chicago, 4 hours away. They were away from their family, they were away from their support system. Many of them were incredibly financially impacted by that. So my goal coming into it was, how can I create a closer to home model where families would not have to leave their community? And that was met with a lot of resistance by the then senior leadership team because it was just known we were going to take care of the ED stuff. We were going to take care of the low acuity stuff, but everything else was going to be shipped out to Chicago. So it took me the first 6 months really just to convince my colleagues why it mattered. And of course, I did that based on data, based on, the socioeconomic challenges that we were facing in the community and a really good business plan. The great news about OSF was that it was a Catholic organization, so incredibly mission driven. And our board, I know you'll be talking to one of my board members, was half of the board were nuns. So the good news was they were very vested and very committed to a mission of helping children, which is always helpful in an organization when your own values align with the mission. So for me, there, certainly I needed to have the data, I needed to have the buy in from senior leadership. And then we really got to work on how do we put services in place that are really going to allow kids to stay in their community. I will tell you one of the hardest parts of that whole plan was I seem to just say, "Okay, I'm gonna go to Peoria, Illinois." Lots of docs, don't often just say, "Yes, I'm going to wind up in Peoria, Illinois." So recruitment, was quite the challenge, but we were able to create something that was, appealing for them, and many of those physicians and providers that I was able to bring on board there, have stayed, because they saw the great work they were able to do, and Peoria became a great place to live and raise their families and do good work.
And you were extraordinarily successful. So then, once again, Jersey Girl gets tapped. And now you're in Orlando. Talk about that transition and what drew you to leading one of the most complex areas. You're leading a level 1 trauma center, very different than a children's organization primarily. What did you do immediately in terms of establishing the team around you to do that? But why did you say yes to that particular opportunity?
So there have been 2 yeses for me at Orlando Health. My first yes was coming. I first started by leading our women's hospital. So more like I'm a labor and delivery nurse by background. Winnie Palmer Hospital is known throughout the nation, have one of the largest NICUs in the country. We populate 2 kindergarten classes a day by the amount of deliveries we do. We do almost 14,000 deliveries.
We need more babies, by the way. We need more of them.
So when that call came, but I'll tell you a funny story. I got the call and they said, "Hey, they've got this inaugural president's position at Orlando Health Winnie Palmer Hospital." And I was like, "Oh, I'm at OSF. We're doing really good work. I've only been here about 2 years." I said, "I'll tell you what, I'm on vacation in Fort Lauderdale. If you want to interview me, here's my window." So somehow they made it happen, but I'm thinking, I'm never going to go here. Well, I interviewed the first day and fell in love with Orlando Health. I fell in love with the culture. I fell in love with the people. So now I really want the job. And I'm like, "Oh, I shouldn't have been so cocky." Anyway, it was a very long process. And I came to serve as the president of Winnie Palmer Hospital. My predecessor had been a nurse as well and had served at Orlando Health for over 30 years. So I'm the inaugural president. Before that, it was the Women's and Children's Hospital combined. So when I came in, I had really, really big shoes to fill. And one of the first things I did was just walk around and be a good listener and really just take in a new culture. And that was critical. The other thing I did, which you talked about going back to your clinical roots, I put scrubs on. I've done that in every job I've been in. I get to the bedside again. Now, I'm not delivering babies or at ORMC taking care of the traumas. That's well out of my skill set now. But I can answer the phone. I can toilet a patient. I can fill up a water jug, clean, I can do those small things that one says to the team, I care. Two says, I have the humility enough to know I don't know how to be a nurse the way you do now. And I'm not afraid to do anything it takes to care for the patient. So those were just some early foundational things I did when I came to a new organization. I think oftentimes people come in, and maybe that has been part of my success. I haven't always been the person who checked all the boxes and comes in knowing everything. In fact, most of the roles I come into, I have a deficit, but I've got a will to learn. I'm a good listener. And I know that there are people around me who I need very much to do the job I do. Building great teams has been absolutely critical in my success, both at Winnie Palmer and then 4 years later, post COVID, when I got another tap on the shoulder and said, "Hey, can you go lead the adult flagship hospital?" And I said, "No, I'm a mom baby nurse. I've never led an adult hospital. In fact, the only thing you don't do at that trauma center is the one thing I'm good at, which is peds and women's." I was like, "Yeah, no, you're the right person." So I walked in that first day and just said, "Oh my," I know nothing. But because I didn't know, I just I was a sponge. I took it all in. I learned, and I allowed those people who were experts to do the work and be the experts. And because of that, they weren't micromanaged. They were feeling great. Like, wow, she really is taking time to let me shine. And um, I think little did they know. It's like I had to. I didn't really know what to do
I'm learning, I'm learning, I'm learning.
to teach me, but because of that, I've been 4 years into this role, and every single person is still on my team, and if they're not, it's because they've gone on to be promoted, not because they left me or left the organization. So,
Well, your leadership style, as high level and high, sort of like the power position that you're in, it sounds like it's driven from understanding the detail and what's happening. Even the strategies that you're leading at ORMC is getting closer to where the people are and how you serve them. Can you just talk about that strategy a little bit? And then I want to go to more of the strategic as we close out.
yeah, I think, as you know, people are everything, right? So, if I can't be available, both physically present in the building and I can't be available to the teams, the work isn't going to get done. It's always about understanding the why and being accessible. So, people say in healthcare, who's the most important person in your building? And many times you'll hear, oh, of course, it's the patient. Well, it's clearly why we exist is to serve the patient. But if you ask me who are the most important people in the building, it's actually my team members. Because if I don't have team members who are happy and have the resources they need, then they are not going to take good care of the patients. So and people also say, what is your job? Like, what does a hospital president do? And I'm the keeper of the culture. That is my main job. So I spend a lot of time on people, and then I just let those people run. So, again, there's strategy. I'm responsible for all those things, strategy, business, all of those things matter, but none of it matters if I don't have the right people to.
Sometimes, though, that people excellent leaders who do as you do, sort of like staying very close to sort of like the front line, staying very close to the people that you serve, your patients, taking it to now, how do you level all of these details up to strategy where you have been, again, just sort of like people that I've talked to who have worked with you, your strategic lens is exceptional. You start here, but you're able to really bring it down to the key things to drive a strategy. What's your secret to allowing you to be successful? Because some people get bogged down. So, just what's your advice for people to do that well?
Yeah, well, healthcare is moving just way too fast to be bogged down in, analysis paralysis. I know that's pretty cliche, but it's good to be in an organization where you're able to fail fast. It's just moving too quickly. So I appreciate the data, I appreciate the analytics, but I'm a doer. So I can look at something really quickly. I can map out a strategy. I am like, okay, let's execute on the strategy. And if it's not the right one, we'll pivot and we'll turn around. Um, Healthcare as it is a laggard in everything that we do. You look at many other industries who are using AI, have been using the latest technology. We are just scratching the surface of those things. And I think it's because there are people in the beds. The work that we do is people. So we want to be ultra cautious because there's a person at the end of that. And I agree with all of those things. But in fact, I think that we cause more harm when we're not nimble and agile and uh, execute quickly, because we leave the patient behind in too many cases. So that doesn't mean that I haven't failed and it hasn't cost me money and it hasn't cost me time, but the majority of the time it serves me well because it's too fast to be that type of person who's going to opine. Somebody's going to be ahead of you. The competition down the street's going to, outpace you and all of those things. So I say create a strategy, act quickly, and if it's not the right one, pivot just as quickly.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you for all these different steps that you've taken in your leadership career, now being at the most senior level, at some point you started to have a board that this is now you're reporting to a board. How do you use your board? How has that changed over time for you?
Yeah. So early on in Orlando Health's history, the board was very large. So you know that if you have a very large board, it's often difficult to come to consensus. The board was very interested in what I would say were very tactical pieces of the business. So it took some time to really get the board to be a very strategic thinking board. Quite frankly, they didn't need to opine on the color that we were painting the hospital or other things like that. It was, where are we going to spend the next $1 billion of capital? What is the next market we should be in? Or is our mission and our vision what we want it to be? That's where we really needed the board to be. But we had grown up as a very small community hospital, and sometimes in those small community not-for-profit hospitals, they're sort of grassroots people who see the every day and they want to be involved in that. So as Orlando Health grew, in fact, we shrunk the board to be able to be more better decision makers because it was a small group. We could come to have really good discussion, but also get to a place where we could move fast, and really took the board out of those things that were um, what I would consider. That's why you pay us, right? That's why you have executives. We're the ones who should be worried about these things. We really need our board to be driving us strategically. So definitely a transition, but a great board now, very diverse on purpose. I also think you have to have a board that is populated with a diverse mindset, both diverse by way of having females on the board. We are very proud to have females on the board. Very proud to have board members of color. We really think, and that wasn't always. It wasn't all. It was very homogenous. It was a lot of white men sitting on our board for a long time. But you don't get the best results because that's not representative of the people we're serving any longer.
Certainly not in diverse community and fast-moving pace as the members you serve. Kelly, as we close out this inspiring women conversation, usually I ask for like advice for like earlier stage women. I'd love for you to just give your best advice to women, senior women executives, in terms of how they can sort of like have the best relations with their board as well as gain, their input in a way that's helpful to you as a senior executive.
Yeah, maybe I'll start. Maybe I'll end with a little bit of a story because I think it matters how you show up to your board, and I think for more senior executives, vulnerability for us is often a problem. And I will say, if you're a senior female leader and you haven't gotten to that place where you realize and are comfortable with you're not perfect, no one expects you to be perfect. I'm going to just give you a story about how supported I felt by my board. We had a very negative occurrence at my hospital. In fact, we it was a very a young lady who committed suicide within the walls of our hospital. Now we had all the policies and procedures and everything that we should have, and quite frankly, we failed this patient. We did not do what we needed to do to protect her. Now. She was hell bent on committing the act, which made it a little more difficult. But that is our job, to understand mental health and understand the challenges. This patient took her life very young. My daughter had just gotten married around the same age, and I had a really hard time coping with it. I really didn't want to come to work. I just kept picturing my daughter and what I had with her and what this family wouldn't have. How did I fail? All of these things, and I was really in a bad headspace, and said, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I don't know if I can. Um, and I felt the board needed to know. So I came to the board, and again, we're not very much in the details. Lots of things happen in hospitals we don't go to the board with. But this one was significant for me because I wanted the board to understand how impactful these things are every day. So I went and I shared the story with the board with lots of tears. And a vulnerability to say, I'm not doing well. I am really having a hard time coping with this. And every one of those board members, with open arms and support, said, how can we help you? And not only how can we help you, if you are struggling, what about the doc that was involved? What about the nurse that was involved? How many other people do we need to wrap our arms around? So, um, that feeling of support from a board where I wasn't sure, am I going to, get dressed down about this? What's legal implications? Are we going to have a lawsuit? Is the media going to be involved? Not one of those board members asked that question. It was about, are you okay? And it was at that moment where I realized it's okay, to be vulnerable. I think I knew that all along, but even to be vulnerable to a board where we all know I prep like crazy, I show up my best self at the board, everything is ticks and ties.
Right.
I didn't have to be, I had to be human, and I think the board came to appreciate we're gonna be just fine because she cares about people, she cares about this organization, so, uh, I would say as a senior leader, don't be so hard on yourself, really, we're not perfect, we're just people trying to do a good job every day, and, uh, j be open about that, and I think you will be just fine.
That is such a there's so much humanness, in that story of something that devastating, in terms of, what you experience for that person. So thank you so much for sharing that, Kelly. This has been an amazing, Inspiring Women conversation. I've been speaking with Kelly Nierstedt, and Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Interview with Kelly, Kathy, we talked about, I closed out the interview with what it actually means. Like, how do you use your board? How do you, interact with the board? What does it mean to be at this level and now needing to work with the board? So she had some really, really insightful comments. And I thought it would be fun to insert into the interview as a board member. What do you look for in terms of the leadership of the organization? What are specific characteristics of Kelly that you think make her an excellent leader for the job that she's in? And just like sort of like three different perspectives, sort of like, as a board member, what do you look for in leaders? How do you evaluate them? And then as a board member, how do you also think about growing leaders for the objectives of of Orlando Health?
Yeah, as far as the characteristics we look for our leaders, they have to have a high EQ. They have to be self-confident, I think. They have to be self-aware. They have to have self-discipline, but they also have to be able to tune into the emotional needs of others. They have to have genuine empathy towards their patients and staff. Another characteristic we look for is someone who has great decision-making skills. Hospital executives deal with a lot of complexities these days, so they have to be able to fine-tune those operations. And they have to be adaptive to change. And as you know, Lori, the healthcare environment today is going through so much change rapidly. There are shifting reimbursement models. We have new medical technologies and there are regulatory changes. So these executives have to be open to change. They have to embrace change, but they also sometimes have to pivot quickly and guide the organization through these changes and through the uncertain times we're going through. Um, Other characteristics, they have to be excellent communicators. They should have great leadership skills, a deep understanding of the healthcare environment. Um, they should be good at mentoring, and hopefully they can attract great talent. Most importantly, I think they should have a high standard of ethics and integrity. So, how does Kelly embody these qualities? Kelly is a very capable leader. She can make sound decisions, sometimes under pressure. She's transparent, she's open, and she's an approachable leader. She allows her team to execute on their responsibilities. She doesn't micromanage them, but if they need assistance, she's there to provide guidance if needed. Kelly is a visible leader. She's well respected by her staff and peers. She leads with authenticity and integrity. Kelly does what she says she's going to do, and she also owns up to her mistakes and her responsibilities. Um, so, how does Kelly demonstrate that to the board? Kelly delivers results, and this is where she really shines. She's made a remarkable turnaround at our flagship hospital. She's done this by improving key metrics, such as the financial health of the hospital. She's improved the patient experience. She's decreased readmission rates. She's done other quality metrics. She's improved on other metrics. And this is reflected in Kelly helping us to get that hospital to the CMS 4-star rating. She exemplifies the values our hospital represents, and she lives them. Kelly demands excellence. She partners with our physicians. She thrives on growth and innovation. Um, and I think especially important to me is that she accepts responsibility even when things don't go well. We recently had an unfortunate event at our hospital. Kelly immediately sprang into action to evaluate the situation. She addressed any challenges and she instituted changes. But what was most important to me, or just as important, is that she insisted on coming before the board. In our management of the hospital, we don't often see Kelly face to face, but she wanted to come, explain in her own words what had happened, and give us a chance to ask questions. Kelly accepted full responsibility for that situation, full responsibility. You have to appreciate someone like that. Kelly is the consummate hospital president. She genuinely cares for our patients and for our staff. Kelly, I'd say, is the heartbeat of our hospital, and we're incredibly fortunate to have her.
Wow. That is amazing. That is amazing. And you know what, Kathy? She brought up that incident in her in the interview. And she went through that, and she also actually talked about how much it meant to her to be able to express vulnerability in terms of how she was personally dealing with that situation, and the support that she received, and that just like her ability as a leader to have an important, to be vulnerable in a way that was needed for her. It meant a lot. Just such a two-way dynamic there that is, as you well know, not always the case in a boardroom. So that is just exceptional, and I'm confident that you have a lot to do with creating that kind of environment.
Oh, no, I remember that very, very well, and it's kind of funny because she even said sometimes she was having trouble coming through that door, knowing about the heavy responsibility that she had carried, and I said, "Kelly, this organization absolutely needs you, so if you have trouble going through that door, let me know and I'll give you a little push." But she is just an incredible, incredible leader, and we're very fortunate to have her.
Awesome. Awesome. Kathy, this is gold.